Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a deep dive on a concept that is absolutely fundamental to any successful development program, and that is the theory of change. Look, whether you're a program manager, a researcher, or really any development professional, mastering this is a total game changer. We're not going to just read through dry definitions today. Instead, we're building a robust, actionable framework from the ground up. And to make it real, we'll apply all of these concepts to a very real-world case study, improving girls' secondary education. Okay, so what actually is a theory of change? Far too often, people treat it like it's just this static picture, right? Just a diagram of boxes and arrows you have to throw together for a funding proposal. But honestly, it's so much more than that. It is the living, breathing framework of your causal reasoning. It literally connects the deep-seated root causes of a problem to the exact actions you need to address them, all while making your underlying assumptions, risks, and evidence completely explicit. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. Number 1, defining the root problem. 2, context, power, and inclusion. 3, mapping backwards from impact. 4, constructing multiple causal pathways. And 5, testing assumptions and risks. Step 1, defining the root problem, moving beyond symptoms to uncover root causes. We really have to start with the problem itself, not our preferred activities. This right here perfectly illustrates the difference between an amateur and an expert approach. Take a weak problem statement like, communities need awareness sessions about child marriage. See the flaw there? It prematurely prescribes a solution. It just assumes awareness is the magical fix. Now contrast that with the strong statement. A high proportion of girls in target districts marry before 18, limiting their education, health, agency, and future livelihoods. A strong statement like that strictly defines the undesirable condition. It lets your team actually investigate different causes, rather than blindly assuming a single intervention is the answer. Once you've got that strong statement, you have to employ a peeling the onion technique. Development problems almost always have visible symptoms on top, but much deeper root causes underneath. So looking at our girls' education case study, low school attendance, that's just a visible symptom. If we only pass out school supplies to address that symptom, we are totally failing to address the actual structural drivers of the problem. We're missing things like unsafe travel, deep-seated social norms that restricted girls' mobility, and household poverty. We've got to map all of these out so we avoid picking convenient activities that don't actually drive real change. Step 2. Context, power, and inclusion. Integrating political economy and GSI from the ground up. Change doesn't just happen in a vacuum, so understanding the landscape is absolutely critical. When we analyze power, formal institutions don't always explain how decisions are really made. We have to look at different layers of power. Visible power is about formal laws and budgets, like giving women seats on school committees. But listen, simply changing visible representation means nothing if hidden power is at play. That's things like male relatives dictating how those women on the committee vote. And even deeper than that is invisible power, internalized beliefs and norms about what girls are even capable of. Your theory of change absolutely must account for how all these different types of power are going to shift. And that brings us directly to gender equality and social inclusion, widely known as GESI. Guys, this cannot be an afterthought that you just tack on at the end of your design. It has to shape your pathways right from the start. We need to be constantly asking, who is experiencing this problem the most severely? And whose experiences are being hidden by big aggregate data? We have to look at intersections. A girl facing barriers to education might also be navigating poverty, a disability, or even displacement based on geographic location, ethnicity, or religion. Step 3. Mapping backwards from impact, defining long-term change and the preconditions required to reach it. Before plotting out our whole journey, we obviously need to establish our ultimate destination. So the crucial point here is drafting a highly effective impact statement. Take a look at the impact statement for our case study. It describes a significant, lasting change in people's lives. Girls and boys completing quality secondary education and achieving improved learning, agency, and future opportunities. It's important, it's specific, and it's realistic. Just remember, a single program rarely controls this entire impact completely on its own. It's contributing to it alongside governments, communities, and other wider social forces. So how do we build out this logic? We actually use a backward mapping approach. We start right at the top with that impact, and we work completely backwards by asking, okay, what must be true immediately before this impact can be achieved? Well, those become our long-term outcomes. Then we ask what must change before those can occur, giving us our intermediate and immediate outcomes. We just continue this clear sequence of preconditions all the way down until we hit the outputs, activities, and inputs that our intervention can actually realistically deliver. I want to pause on this for a second because confusing outputs with outcomes is one of the most common and frankly fatal weaknesses in program design. Always remember, an output is exactly what you deliver. For example, 1,000 teachers completing a training program. An outcome, on the other hand, is how behavior or institutional practice actually changes in response to that output. Let's be real, training completion guarantees absolutely nothing on its own. The real outcome is when those teachers consistently apply improved classroom methods and the students actually participate more actively. Step 4. Constructing multiple causal pathways. Connecting interventions to outcomes through explicit causal mechanisms. Complex problems are pretty much never solved with just one linear intervention. Because of that, a strong theory of change has to map out how different pathways reinforce one another. For our girls' education case study, we're looking at 4 interconnected causal pathways. Think about it. Better teaching quality alone, our school quality pathway, is not going to reduce dropout rates if girls are still facing unsafe travel or the threat of early marriage. That is exactly why we also need the family and social norm pathway, the safety and access pathway, and the institutional pathway. They absolutely must work together. Now, within those pathways, you have to explain the how. This is what we call the causal mechanism. Every single arrow in your theory of change diagram needs to be challenged. You can't just draw an arrow from teacher training straight to improved learning and just hope for the best. Instead, you've got to explicitly spell out the exact shift in capability or behavior. Training and coaching improve teacher knowledge, which leads those teachers to apply effective instructional practices, which means students receive clear explanations, which causes their comprehension to improve, and that is what finally improves learning outcomes. Step 5. Testing assumptions and risks, validating the logic, and embracing uncertainty for adaptive learning. To really validate our logic, we have to look for where our reasoning is most vulnerable. Asking 2 vital questions forces some serious critical engagement with your causal logic. First, is this result necessary? Could the higher result occur without it? And second, is this result sufficient? Would achieving it alone produce the higher result? Asking if a result is sufficient is amazing because it often reveals missing pathways or complementary interventions that you haven't even considered yet. Now, there are a few overlapping concepts here that tend to trip teams up. Assumptions are conditions necessary for your pathway to work, like assuming trained teachers actually remain in their target schools. Risks are uncertain events that negatively affect results, like high teacher turnover. And external factors are those contextual influences completely outside your control, like a national curriculum reform. Keep in mind, your assumptions can't just be vague positive statements. They need to be explicitly linked to specific causal connections in your framework. To keep our accountability realistic, we use something called sphere analysis. This separates what we actually control, like our resources, activities, and quality standards, from what we can only influence, like participant behavior and service uptake. Finally, there's our sphere of interest, which covers those longer-term impacts that depend on a whole bunch of different actors. By distinguishing between control, influence, and interest, we prevent overclaiming attribution. It ensures we're making a credible, analytically defensible claim about what our program is actually contributing to the world. And that brings us to a final really crucial question. A theory of change is never truly finished. It's a framework for identifying and testing uncertainty. When the context shifts, when new evidence evolves, or when an assumption outright fails, does your theory of change adapt? Does it capture those hard-won lessons? Or does it just sit forgotten in a drawer, treated as a static compliance document? I want to challenge you to use it as a dynamic tool to guide your work, spark curiosity, and ultimately drive real, lasting change. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.